Hey guys, I hope you're all having an amazing day. So I would just like to start the video out by saying a massive thank you for all the support on the face reveal video. And like I was saying in the video, now that I do have the face cam, I can do more of these like discussion type videos. At the end of that video, I did ask you guys if you wanted to see a video on VHS, my thoughts, as well as like everything you need to know about the game. And you guys did say that you wanted to, so here it is. If you guys do want to see more videos like this, then make sure you do leave a like and subscribe. All the support is really appreciated. And without further ado, let's jump straight into the video. The first question we're going to answer is, what is VHS? VHS is the newest installment in the 4v1 asymmetrical horror genre, and in opposition to other titles in this genre, it is set in the 80s, which is really cool. All the character progression, the overall theme of the game, maps, it's all set around this like VH, sort of like a Blockbuster store, which is really cool. What I think is amazing about the game as well is, rather than other titles which typically focus on the gory, slasher aspect of horror, these guys purely focus on that like retros 80s theme, which I think is absolutely awesome. So how does VHS actually work? From a teen perspective, your goal is to eliminate the killer from the game. This is accomplished through 4 ancient stigmas known as burn, shock, curse, and purify. Now, there are weapons associated with these stigmas that can be crafted at crafting stations around the map. Now, once you hit the killer using one of these weapons, they'll be temporarily stunned and they'll be invulnerable to further attacks temporarily. Once they do come back into the game, they'll once again be vulnerable. And then when they've been hit with all 4 stigmas, they'll be eliminated from the game and the teens win. So from a killer's perspective, your goal is to eliminate the teens from the game. Initially, this is done by hitting them twice, which will then put them into a down state where they can be revived by their teammates. As the game goes on, if you hit the teens a certain amount of times, you'll become enraged, which means you can down them instantly. Depending on how quickly they're revived, they can be picked up a certain amount of times before they're completely eliminated from the game. There are currently 3 killers in the game. There is the Doll Master, the Reptile, and the Werewolf. Now, his name isn't actually the Reptile, but he's a reptilian creature, so I'm going to call him the Reptile. But overall, your goal is to just eliminate them from the game and prevent them from hitting you with all 4 of the stigmas that I mentioned earlier. So why is VHS so unique in comparison to other games in the 4v1 asymmetrical horror genre? Well, rather than focusing on the typical slasher, gory aspect, these guys really focus on driving that 80s theme through the character progression, perks, maps, everything. The journey, which is, the overall progression system in the game, which we'll talk about later. You can tell that they've put in the time to make you feel really immersed in the 80s theme. At first, I wasn't too sure about it, but the more I've looked into the game, the more I think they've done an absolutely amazing job with the theme. Another reason why VHS is so unique is the way they've gone about balancing in the game. So everything has been so well thought out, and it seems to follow like a cost-benefit ratio. So from perks to survivor weapons to killer abilities, the things that are going to benefit you the most in the game also cost the most. Now, if you compare this to a game like Dead by Daylight, where you can pretty much, run the best possible perks, items with no real drawback, I think they've really gone in a good direction here in terms of balancing. Finally, we have the shift of power that occurs throughout the course of a game. Now, typically what I've seen in other games in the genre is like either the killer maybe slowly grows over time, or on the other end, the survivors just stay around the same. They bring in what they bring in and that's it. Like they don't sort of, get stronger or weaker over time. But with this game, the killer starts off super strong. The survivors have nothing, or the teens, sorry, have nothing to really counter the killer. But then, all of a sudden they start crafting weapons and the power starts to shift towards the teens. But then they've also made it so that the killer has, avenues to counter the survivors and their weapons. So, the shift of power might head back towards the killer, and then all of a sudden the survivors craft more weapons, goes back to the survivors, the killer gets a kill, it goes back towards the killer, and power's constantly changing depending on how they perform, which makes it really exciting, and I feel like that will really add to the replayability of the game. Next question we have is, are there cosmetics in VHS? And the simple answer is yes. There's an extensive amount of cosmetics. The developers have actually stated that you can customize everything from your shoes, pants, shirt, jacket, gloves, pretty much every item of clothing that you can think of, you can customize. Also, the journey I was talking about before, the character progression system, allows you to access exclusive legendary skins for each individual team. And then finally, I'm assuming, they haven't really talked about it yet, but I'm assuming there will be cosmetics on the killer side as well. And we have already seen that there are actually emotes that you can get for the killer, like this Michael Jackson dance that you can do with the werewolf, which is absolutely hilarious. Now, I've briefly mentioned it already, but I know you guys are probably wondering, what is this VHS progression system I've been talking about known as the journey? So the key takeaway from this progression system, and the reason I love it the most, is that when you're progressing your characters, it's not just a race to get the best possible perks from like every character and, you know, because obviously each character has their own unique perks, and usually like one or maybe two are meta. And what you do is you pretty much just level up the character to get their perks and then put them on the person that you play, and then you never touch them again. And it is completely different to other games, which I think is really cool. The journey is a 3-act system which paths you through a series of nodes. Now you can choose which direction you want to go down, and each direction provides you with perks, cosmetics, and perk points that are unique to that specific character. Additionally, going down these paths allows you to raise the character's potential, which grants that specific character more perk points, which we'll get into more when we answer the next question. So the next question we have is, how do perks actually work in VHS? So all the perks revolve around the perk point system. This system allocates a certain amount of perk points to each perk in the game depending on how much it has been tiered up. For example, you could have 8 perk points in total, and your tier 3 perks, let's say for example they take up 3 perk points, that means you could have 2 tier 3 perks and 1 tier 2 perk. Whereas if you had lots of tier 1 perks, then you could potentially have up to 8. Just keep in mind that this is hypothetical, as the developers have told us about the system, but not exactly how many perk points that you have. This also means that tier 1 perks aren't necessarily useless like they are in other games where you just try to tier them up as fast as possible, as you could still get the benefit from a lower tier perk, as it will take up less room in your loadout. It is also important to note that the developers have been really smart when designing the perks, and they've pretty much just made perks what they should be, a little bit of a bonus to a certain playstyle, whereas some other games that we've played, Dead by Daylight, where they actually use perks as a band-aid for issues with the game. These perks just give you slight advantages, so depending on what combinations you have, it might suit a particular playstyle, whether you're a healer, or maybe you're a bit more of a bold player. You can assign perks to help you with that playstyle, but you're not going to be reliant on perks, and it's not just going to be a matter of who can out-perk the other team, but more so who can out-skill the other team. Alright, so now we are on to the big one, which is VHS versus Dead by Daylight. Now, I just wanted to make it clear that I am going to be talking from a VHS perspective, because this video is about VHS. So first of all, we are going to talk about the negatives. For me to maintain credibility, it is important that I talk about both the negatives and the positives. So when it comes to negatives, first of all, there is the fact that the Hellbent Games developers have been very blunt when it comes to the release date of the beta and the full game, as well as anti-cheat systems. Now, regarding the systems, cheaters, it's just an ongoing battle, developers versus cheaters, because they just find new ways, new programs to cheat. So I do understand why they've been blunt on that. But when it comes to, release dates and stuff like that, from what I've seen so far, the developers are working very hard, so it isn't that big of an issue. But when you're comparing the two games, Dead by Daylight doesn't do a lot of things right. But one thing they do right is the frequent release of new content, and they do implement their plans when it comes to release dates for new content. Now, knowing the creators of Dead by Daylight, it's probably just a way to get money by, getting new players in. But when we are comparing the two, it is important to note that so far, the developers of Hellbent Games have been very blunt, whereas DBD developers are very organized when it comes to new content. The next negative is licensing. So far, the Hellbent Games developers haven't said anything about implementing licensed characters into their game. This isn't necessarily a negative, as right now, it's sort of just speculation at the moment. We don't know. There could be. Like I was saying before, The theme of the game is in the 80s, which is widely considered to be the prime era of horror. So there is the potential for some awesome licenses. But as of right now, as a very experienced DBD player, and I'm sure that I speak for a lot of you as well, licenses are the reason that we stuck with the game for so long. Being able to play, your favorite killer from your favorite horror movie, it added to the replayability of the game. So we'll have to see, but as of right now, they haven't said anything. So licensing could potentially be an issue, or it could be like it was for DBD, which was absolutely perfect for the game. All right, now on to what you guys want to hear and what I want to say, which is the positives. So rather than explain it to you, firstly, for my first point, I'm going to show you guys an interview with one of the leading developers at Behavior, talking about MMR and pretty much one of the key issues of it, and just pay attention to the way he talked in comparison to one of the leading developers at Hellbent Games discussing an important issue in 4v1 asymmetrical horror games, which is balancing the game around, four-mans which are communicating in comparison to solo players finding, that middle ground. And like I said before, just pay attention to how they talk, and I'll see you all in a second. All right, so first up, we have Patrick, who is a lead game designer at Behavior. Now, take a listen to his take on the issue.
That as well, but I think it'd be really interesting to kind of discuss as well, why is it that this is what was decided to constitute a win, and kind of talking about that idea of, winning so many matches or losing so many.
Yeah, like there's sort of a question I get asked a lot. I see from the community. I've had even people on the team talk to me about. They talk about the survivor perspective of, hey, I was playing a game of Survivor and I looped the killer for 7 consecutive hours, and I unhooked 18 other survivors, and I healed for 93 health states. I fixed 10 generators. It was such an amazing game. I truly am a god amongst mankind when I play Dead by Daylight. But then right at the end, I got thrown on a hook and I died, and I don't like that counts as a loss. And the idea here is, wouldn't it be nice if you could do all of that and sometimes you'd get out alive? Right? Like, wouldn't that be nice? That's the idea. That's all MMR is trying to do, is it goes, I know that you died. It's ignored.
Right, I'm gonna stop it there. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if the MMR system we spent over a year developing actually did what it's supposed to do? Now, I feel like this is just a small snippet representing how out of touch some of these developers are with their own game. Now, I'm not one to say whether they've been working hard or not, but they're pretty much saying here that the system they spent over a year making, which is a long time, think of everything you get done in a year, isn't doing what it's supposed to do. And even taking away, exactly what he's saying and just looking at his demeanor, you would think that he's a YouTuber like myself, just putting his perspective out there and not one of the key developers in the development of the game. Like, he has a lot of control in these decisions, and he's sort of just throwing his hands up like, wouldn't it be nice? Rather than doing that, shouldn't you be implementing a plan of action of how this can be improved to improve the experience of your players? Alright, so next up we have Jeff, who is a lead gameplay programmer at Hellbent Games. Now just listen to his response about a key issue facing 4v1 asymmetrical horror games in comparison to Patrick's response. Take a listen.
That's come up a lot has been our HUD and why we include so much information on it. Jeff, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we love to play and we study the asymmetric genre closely. One thing we've observed is that there's the power difference between teams that queue into a match as a group of friends on voice comms versus those that queue up solo can be huge. So, and the members of the team, they can call out over voice chat like where they are, where the enemy is, what they're doing, their weapon status, what their plans of the next move are. And they work so much more as a cohesive unit. And so that power difference is a real problem from a game balance perspective, because we're assuming players of similar skill. If we make the monster powerful enough to deal with those coordinated groups, then they can really overwhelm the solo players. But conversely, if you balance the monster for a team of solo players and they don't have any information and can't communicate with their teammates, and the coordinated groups just dominate the monster. So our approach was to go ahead and build and balance the monsters from the beginning to be powerful enough to face off against a full coordinated team and then give the solo players the tools they need to be on a level playing field.
All right, I'm going to stop that clip there. So straight off the bat, you can hear how Jeff and the Hellbent Games developers have a clear understanding of an issue that DBD has been struggling with for years, and they are still struggling with to this day, balancing a 4v1 asymmetrical game around solo players versus full four-man squads with communication. It's tough. It is not an easy issue to deal with, but these guys have looked into it. They've talked about it, not necessarily in this stream, but in other streams that I've watched. They've talked about how they've looked into the genre. They've played other games in the genre for thousands of hours to gain a thorough understanding of the issues so that they can take it to their game and solve these issues. I think the approach that they've made, he's clear with his response, he's concise, and he just looks like he's looked into the issue, and you can tell that he really cares and that they're trying to develop the best game possible. Now, another thing that you VHS fans should be very excited about is that VHS literally fixes every issue that I've seen with Dead by Daylight, and let's just mention a few. So obviously there is the issue of camping, tunneling, proxy camping, all that kind of stuff. The reason that it's still an issue to this day in Dead by Daylight is because, one, the developers tried to patch it up with perks, and two, is because they're viable strategies. Now, personally, when I'm playing Survivor, for example, I see quite a few people in the streams be like, oh, he's camping, you know, scummy tactics, stuff like that. But, you know, the killer is doing what they have to do to win as much as the survivors are trying to do what they have to escape. And I'll never put it against the killer for, you know, face camping or anything like that. They're just playing the game. And, you know, while it is heavily scrutinized throughout the DBD community, these are viable strategies, and these strategies are being implemented more following the implementation of MMR, because it's an even tougher time for killers. Whereas in VHS, it's not a viable strategy, so people aren't going to do it. I mean, people might do it to be toxic, I don't know. But overall, it's not a viable strategy. In Dead by Daylight, camping is a viable strategy, a way to get someone out of the game. Whereas if you do that in VHS, the teens are going to craft weapons that they can use against you. That's valuable time that you're spending camping someone on the ground. There's no hooks, obviously they'll just be on the ground. That's valuable time that you're spending, that you could be spending pressuring people who are trying to craft weapons to use against you by just looking at someone on the ground. So it's not a viable strategy like it is in Dead by Daylight. Other issues that DBD has that this game fixes is OP perks. So like I was saying, they tend to follow a benefit to cost ratio sort of decision-making matrix when they're deciding on like perks and character progression, stuff like that. So the strongest perks in this game, again, I'd just like to reiterate that perks are just a little bonus. It's not like Dead by Daylight where it's a band-aid fix to fix an issue with the game, and there are literally like 8 viable perks that will actually carry you in the higher MMR. With this game, it just gives you slight bonuses. So they've fixed not only the tunneling camping issue, but the perk issue. From what I've seen so far, streamers who have played played early access with the game have commented that they haven't noticed any bugs, which is crazy. It's not even in beta yet, and there may be bugs. I'm not saying that there isn't, but from what I've seen so far, the people who have had early access to the game are saying that they haven't come across any noticeable bugs, which is a really good sign. And it's another reason why I'm not concerned. You guys would have seen that I mentioned before about how, as a negative, that they haven't confirmed any dates for the beta and stuff like that. But that doesn't really concern me if, you know, there's no bugs and they're taking the extra time to make sure the game is perfect. And then finally, the last point I want to make is the development team. And that was just an example, so I didn't have to, you know, spend a long time explaining it. But did you see how Jeff responded to a key issue in comparison to Patrick? You saw Patrick just, you know, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if our MMR system actually worked? And, you know, in opposition to the Hellbent Games developers who took the time to look into the issue and come up with a clear and, you know, viable solution that could potentially work. I think it's something to be very optimistic about and look forward to following the growth of VHS. All right, now on to the last question. What are my thoughts on VHS? Honestly, I am so excited for this game. Unfortunately, being on console, it might be a bit later down the track when I'm able to access the game. I know that a lot of you would be on console who are very excited. But, you know, talking about the factors I mentioned before, the development team that look like they care and they're working super hard and just, they don't look out of touch. They look like they've researched heavily and they really know what they're talking about when it comes to issues and health of the game, overall health of the game, sorry. Every decision that they've made, it's really reassuring that I've seen so far, whether it be perks, character progression, maps, killer abilities, survival weapons, everything has been so well thought through, which is really, really reassuring. You can tell that they've taken the time to research it, look what hasn't worked with other games, and, you know, coming up with solutions and implementing it into their game, which is really, really good. The characters so far look amazing. I haven't looked into their stories, but I'm well aware. Each character obviously ties into the 80s theme, and then they also have their own unique perks. So I'm assuming there'll be like a healer, maybe someone who crafts weapons faster, a more bold play around chases. I'm not too sure yet. But every character looks really awesome for what I've seen so far. And then it begs the ultimate question, will VHS topple the absolute powerhouse of the genre for the last 5 years, which is Dead by Daylight? And to be honest, I think we should remain optimistic. Me personally, I tend to get caught up with the excitement of the game, such as Back 4 Blood. I pre-ordered it and I haven't even played it yet because I just got caught up in the hype. I think you should try and stay well grounded, but remain optimistic. You know, DBD has been the powerhouse of the genre for the last 5 years for a reason. You know, licenses, consistent content, and believe it or not, they do fix issues eventually. It just takes them a lot longer than they should, even though they don't really listen to the community. You know, there is a reason it's been at the top of the table for such a long time. But, you know, will VHS top it? You know, only time will tell. But do remain hopeful. Don't just shut it down because, and say, you know, DBD has licenses, you know, they'll never be able to topple it, because you never know what could happen. So do remain optimistic. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching the video. If you do want to see more videos like this, make sure you do leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody.